welcome to this exciting episode of Unhidden History, the channel that explores what the textbook ignores. I'm your host, Andria Redlin. I'm an author, graphic arts student, history lover, and I love digging deep into history's graveyard to find the details you won't find in the textbooks. The weirder the better. If you're new here, I'm glad to have you. If not, thanks for sticking with me. I know I have a long way to go to be worthy of your attention, but I am glad you're here. If you've been following me for a while, you'll know that my channel name had to change because I didn't know several other channels had the same name, so I've recently renamed it and redesigned the logo from scratch. Since the logo was an eyeball, I guess the name change from Hidden History to Unhidden History seems to make more sense anyway. Live and learn, right? I don't know who needs to hear this today, but here it goes. Don't beat yourself up about your mistakes. Just like I was beating myself up about not properly researching channel names. At least I guess I just wasn't doing it correctly. So as long as you learn from your mistakes and try to fix them, that's all that really matters, right? Strive for your best, not for perfection. Besides, perfection's overrated anyway. Sorry about wandering off the path and going into after-school special mode. So let's get back on track. But before we dive in and have you getting completely lost in the history rabbit hole, let's have a quick pause so I can tell you about our sponsor, Dazzling Designs Decor & More, my company, which I've linked below. Dazzling Designs Decor & More, which used to be called Winter Moon Designs, is not just the only place to find unhidden history merchandise like t-shirts, a really cool purse with flames on it, and other things like that, but you'll also find home decor, clothing, and other things that might make your house a home, many of which are historically inspired, designed by none other than yours truly. So in today's episode, come with me as we travel back just over 400 years ago to the ruins of historic Jamestown, one of North America's first European settlements that served as a starting point for the eventual creation of the United States. Now, just to warn you, yes, I am warning you, pay attention. This video will discuss some rather distressing as well as disgusting topics, some of which are downright nauseating, but that's what I do. I dig into the nitty-gritty bits of history. I think I do this because I just don't want to read about a historical event. I want to actually, close my eyes and feel like I've gone back in time. It's one thing to read, the Union soldier was shot in the arm and then his arm had to be cut off. It's another to dig deeper and imagine this. With no anesthetic available, the poor soldier had to choke down a swig of brandy and bite down on a stick as the surgeon worked as quickly as he could to saw off his arm. All he can think about as the surgeon's knife grated noisily back and forth through his shattered bones was the pain that seemed to freeze his soul and crush his will to live. And even that was small compared to the screams of other wounded men around him, enveloped in the stench of death. At the very least, details like this might just get you to appreciate your own life a bit more, since we live in modern times and all that, and our lives are a lot easier, even on the bad days. I should also warn you that this is likely gonna be my longest video yet, because the more I plunged into the research rabbit hole, learning about Jamestown, the more details I wanted to put in. Just another side effect of the curious mind, right? The first part of the video will give you a detailed overview of Jamestown's origins, heading up to its eventual abandonment as a place to live, and how all the archaeological excavations began there. And the second part is where we're actually going to go there together and explore parts of it. Now, I filmed this before my channel name changed, so you're probably going to hear it referred to as Hidden History, even though it's now Unhidden History. So, just bear with me and pretend you didn't hear that. The video will end with a boarding of a replica of one of the 3 ships that brought the first residents of Jamestown to America. I debated about leaving the ship footage part of the video in, as the ship's size isn't exactly designed for inside documentaries. It's really small. We were in the largest ship and it is really small inside. Plus there were quite a few people walking around on there and I was trying to keep them out of the frame, but that part of the segment's really short, so just bear with me. Most of my videos are done in podcast style, as you know, with just my voice and a few random visuals. And I don't actually feature me using a camera, since I really don't like appearing on camera. I don't know why, but I feel more comfortable just as a voice. Listen to my voice. But since I was, like, on my first vacation in, like, over 20 years, I figured, hell with it, let's bring the video camera and see what we get. Why not? Now, on that same trip to Jamestown, on our way there, we also visited Burkittsville Cemetery in Maryland, which, as many of you horror fans know, that's where they filmed the Blair Witch Project, part of it anyway. And we also visited Arlington Cemetery, which is going to be a video coming up in the making. And we also saw Williamsburg, but unfortunately missed the Colonial parts of it, as there was literally no place to park, and it was terribly crowded, even for October. And there's something interesting. By the third day of the trip, my husband commented, "You know, we've been traveling for 3 days, and all we've done is visit a bunch of dead people." And after I'd stopped laughing at this comment, I realized he'd had a point, as we had explored one cemetery each day for 3 days in a row, you know, including the tiny little churchyard in Jamestown, plus the bodies in the Archaearium there. That's the museum there. But then I also remembered that I'd always found the lives of our ancestors, like, far more interesting than anything going on in our time. So I like dead people. So what? A girl can have a hobby, right? So if you've ever been to Jamestown, I'd really like to hear about your experiences in the comment section. If you haven't, it really is worth the visit. However, I must warn you that there's a lot of walking involved, and the surrounding area is rather swampy. So wear comfortable shoes, bring bottled water, and please do not forget your bug spray, or you'll be scratching your ass more than usual. There's also a cafe near the shore of the river, which has a restroom, so that's a plus. And there's also the nearby Archaearium on site. That's the museum that has all the artifacts. More on that later. So, what comes to mind when you think of colonial-era Jamestown? Captain John Smith, Pocahontas, cannons, no flushing toilets in sight for over 4,500 miles? Whatever comes to mind, don't rely on Disney movies to get the historical facts right. Heck, we can't even rely on them to get fictional facts right. Fictional facts? Okay, never mind. But as for me, I will always do my best for you. But please be aware that many sources have conflicting information, which is why I strongly encourage you to do your own research. No matter what I talk about, either on this video or any of my others, do your own research, whether it's from websites or old books. Incidentally, whenever I go on a trip, I always come back with a pile of books. I really don't need another fridge magnet, okay? And to make further research that much easier for you, I always try to list my sources below in the description. Because, I mean, alright, I'll be real with you. The main purpose of my videos is to learn about stuff, have fun doing it, but also to generate interest in historical topics. Even if I can't always get everything 100% correct. You'll still learn something and hopefully enjoy it. Okay, now to give you an overview of this 400-year-old town, we first need to know how it all came about. Researching Jamestown is, yes, it really was going into the research rabbit hole of info, I can tell you. Every topic led to more and more questions, and when I found the answers, I had more questions. So I'll be pulling up a lot of names and small backstories of some of the people who lived there, most of whom you've likely never heard of. So guess what? You're going to learn something new today. It's not just going to be about Pocahontas and John Smith, okay? I mean, how else are we going to get the full picture of historical events, if not through the eyes and words of those who lived there, right? Now, if this video has done nothing more than pique your curiosity and made you dive into more research on your own, then my work here is done. Okay, let's start with a brief overview. It has to be noted that historic Jamestown and Jamestown settlement are in fact two different places. Historic Jamestown, which is what I'm covering today, is the actual site where the real fort and town ruins are located, and it's also what you'll see in the video footage of mine. Jamestown settlement, on the other hand, is a replica of what the fort and town looked like 400 years ago, which might also appeal, that might appeal more to the younger crowd because there's more to see and look at, as it's kind of a living museum. The replica of the Powhatan Indian village is really cool, with the long houses and the fires and all that. It's amazing. You just gotta check it out. And also in the replica of the fort, there's like a blacksmith, there's a baker. Both of these are worth visiting. Now, the real Jamestown is located on the James River in a small island, Jamestown Island, on the east coast of Virginia. It's very isolated. You have to cross like a small swamp to get there from the mainland, and thankfully there's a wide wooden walkway there these days to make the crossing a piece of cake, if you don't mind a bit of a walk. Now, by the time Jamestown was founded in 1607, it was actually not the first North American European settlement. That title goes to St. Augustine in Florida, which was founded in 1565. So, why was Jamestown founded? Now, a time period from the mid-1400s to the mid-1500s, known as the Age of Discovery, or the Age of Exploration, may have had something to do with it. At the time, Spain, as well as other countries, were going loco, crossing the ocean and discovering new and safer trade routes to foreign lands, as well as establishing colonies in the New World, which was what the Americas were called at the time. And King James I of merry old England wanted in on the action. Now, the idea to sail away to the New World came about when Mr. King James granted a charter to establish a new colony in 1606, which is probably the only reason it and the river it bordered were named after him. Don't want to bite the hand that feeds you, right? But unlike the Pilgrims' Plymouth colony in Massachusetts that appeared about 12 years later, far to the north, Jamestown was not founded to escape religious persecution. I'm going to be real with you here. It was founded because of the thirst for finding silver, gold, and a new trade route to the Pacific Ocean. Basically, it was just to get rich. Human nature has not changed at all. So, 100 men and a few boys, numbering about 105 people, 104 depending on what source you read, were called the Virginia Company, and they were led by the sea captain Christopher Newport. They set sail from England on December 6, 1606, though some sources say late December. Whatever the date, we can be sure it was pretty damn cold. Imagine traveling in one of those 3 unheated ships in the middle of winter. And what was in those ships of 3? They were named the Susan Constant, the Discovery, and the Godspeed. Their replicas will be seen later in the video. As I said earlier, you'll get to see their replicas. And if you know anything about colonial ocean travel, it was most definitely not like that Carnival cruise you took on your honeymoon. No. Not only was the water rough, but doing laundry was pretty impossible, and as well as bathing. So you're basically riding a wooden barrel that stinks, and there was always the risk of developing scurvy from not getting enough fresh fruits and vegetables. A typical diet aboard ship in those days consisted of hardtack, preserved salted beef and brine, and copious amounts of alcohol. Nothing quite like getting nauseous before you drink. So imagine living on this boring-ass diet on a journey from Europe to the New World in a tiny little ship, a tiny little stinky ship, on a trip that could take anywhere from 4 weeks to 3 months, depending on the wind, weather, and ocean currents. Oh, how fun. So after surviving this really long and boring and internetless crossing, they arrived on Chesapeake Bay in America on April 26, 1607. A few weeks of exploration many miles to the south led them to choose a small island for the Jamestown settlement on May 13th. The spot was picked not only because it was not inhabited, but being surrounded by water on 3 sides could easily help with defenses if needed. I guess at the time that made it more of a peninsula, right? After probably shaking off seasickness and that sensation of the ground moving up and down after being at sea so long, the company opened the sealed boxes that contained the list of who was to be in charge of this new colony. Me, I want to be in charge. Among those names was Captain John Smith, who, as you probably know, was captured by the Powhatan tribe and allegedly saved from execution by a then 11-year-old Pocahontas, whose real name was Matoka. However, historians now believe that John Smith either misinterpreted the intentions of the tribe and thought he was being executed, or just made the story up. He was a known braggart, okay? I will tell you, like I said, do your research. I may have to do a video to dig deeper into that one. Anyways, the leaders soon, they set everyone to work on building Jamestown Fort. This was a triangular palisade-walled structure that they finished June 16th of 1607. But a fire in 1608 destroyed it, so another one was built. So much for hard work being rewarded. Captain Christopher Newport sailed back to England on June 22nd to get more supplies for the new colony, which was probably a good thing, as living at Jamestown in its early years definitely decreased one's life expectancy significantly. On the fort site today, newer walls have been rebuilt and maintained to give visitors an idea of what it looked like, which is pretty darn cool. It's like you're going back in time. Within these walls are the remains of a church, a garrison, a well, and buildings that were used to store their meager provisions. Modern metal crosses are scattered here and there. Stick with me long enough and I'll tell you why, though I'm sure you could probably guess. Records of the fort faded into obscurity by the 1630s. Between that and a few inaccurate guesses as to the original location of the fort, it's no surprise that its ruins went undiscovered until 1994. Located near a red brick 17th century church tower outside the walls. Also in 1608, the first two English women arrived at Jamestown, one of which was 13-year-old Anne Burris. According to research done from the Archaearium, she was a maidservant whose mistress soon died, leaving her with no female company until the following year. Imagine being just a 13-year-old girl in a fortress full of men. On second thought, maybe we shouldn't. Because it wasn't really the custom for any female to live alone, Anne soon married 2 months later, which likely wasn't by choice. Tragically, she suffered a miscarriage due to a flogging because she supposedly broke a colony rule. Now what the hell kind of society beats a pregnant woman? I don't care what she did, nobody deserves that. And I'm willing to bet that this broken colony rule was something stupid and mundane like laughing too loudly or wearing her sleeves too high up on a Sunday. I mean, heck, even in that time, even gossiping would land you a seat in the ducking stool to have drown you until you promised not to do it again. Oh no, I won't do it anymore. I'm sorry, I'm acting so happy, but because I'm a woman, you're gonna try to think I'm a witch, blah, blah, blah. Violence of the tongue, the crime was called. However, However, a lot of rules were put in place after the starving time to ensure the colony's survival. My personal favorite was that you were not allowed to answer the call of nature within a quarter mile of the well. So basically, no peeing near the well, people. You pee there, we beat you. That aside, not only did Anne survive the starving time, but she had 4 daughters with her husband John Leyden, who was twice her age. Now, the winter of 1609 to 1610 brought about one of the darkest chapters in Jamestown history, known as the starving time. Boy, they sure got creative with their food, but not with what they called stuff. Now, before this winter of perpetual hunger set in, your typical Jamestown diet at the time consisted of bread, fish, corn, and hunted meat. But once that ran out, things got pretty desperate. Trust me, you don't want to know what they ate, but because this is Unhidden History, I'm going to tell you anyway, because you need to know the truth. Now, because the people were under siege inside the walls of the fort due to conflict with the local Powhatan tribe, they were basically locked in there and could not leave or they'd be killed. So what they ate, they basically started with their horses, then the dogs, and the cats, and then snakes, and finally they started eating rats and their shoe leather. Seriously, they cut up their shoes and boiled them and ate that. But eventually, as the bodies of the starved people piled up, they too became a new and gruesome menu option. And as if eating your spouse or your favorite pet to survive wasn't bad enough, you also had to deal with attacks of disease like, fun stuff like typhoid and dysentery, both unpleasant. No pooping near the well. In the end, by the end of the starving time, less than 70 colonists had survived. out of 300. Now, John Smith had escaped this fate as he had returned to England after being injured by a gunpowder explosion in 1609. But the others weren't so lucky. A lot of factors contributed to this high death toll. Maybe more of them would have lived if it hadn't been like the worst drought in 770 years, which was verified by scientists counting tree rings of 1,000-year-old trees. So the drought made food scarce, which was why the Powhatan Indians weren't eager to keep trading, so yeah. There was also questionable drinking water, and I mean that water was BAD to the highest degree. Also, the fact was, instead of focusing on growing crops and hunting and preserving every bit of food they could, the colonists were mostly just relying on trade with the Indian tribe. Not to mention being locked behind the fort walls to survive and stay alive, because anytime one of them left, they were ordered to be killed by Chief Powhatan. More on that later. And needless to say, it was going to take a miracle for this colony to survive. In late May of 1610, there was a new governor of Jamestown who actually had got there yet, so he had been shipwrecked in Bermuda, but when he finally got there from Bermuda, he was like horrified upon seeing the skeletal survivors, the wrecked church, burnt houses, and ruined palisade walls. Unable to help them with provisions, he decided they all needed to go back to England. You, me, let's go back. It seemed that the Jamestown colony had completely failed, but as the ship sailed down the river, it encountered 3 ships from England carrying 150 new colonists, a literal boatload of provisions, and new leaders to help them survive. Though the colony was saved, the next several years would prove to be challenging as well as eventful. Ships carrying livestock arrived, adding variety to the boring diet of the colonists. I mean, eventually you're gonna get sick of shoe leather. But they weren't the only new arrivals to the New World. In 1619, the first Africans, 32 in number, were brought by force to Jamestown after being captured from the San Juan Bautista slave ship that had been bound for Mexico, originally carrying 350 Africans. Whether the 32 new arrivals lived free or died in enslavement is unknown and has been debated for years, but we do know that 9 of them lived at Jamestown. One of them was an Angolan woman recorded as being named Angela, who arrived in August. Even if she was terrified of her new surroundings, that was probably nothing compared to her living conditions on the ship, as she was chained up to other people 24/7, barely fed, was surrounded by the stench of human waste and sometimes dead bodies in what was probably a windowless cargo hold of the ship. That's what it was like on board one of these vessels. And sad to say, toilet privileges were just not always given on these ships, which really sucks. So the people had no choice but to just lay there chained up, soiling themselves over and over again until skin irritation and infection set in. And I mean, probably the worst case of diaper rash, but probably far worse. If you want some kind of idea of what this travel was like, it's well depicted in the Roots series with LeVar Burton. This terrible trip was known as the Middle Passage, and it was common for 20% of the captives to die during the crossing. Thus was the journey that this woman, Angela, had taken. So to sum up her life, first she's stolen from her African home, forced to endure a horrific sea voyage, then she's captured again during a battle. I mean, imagine being chained up and hearing a battle, not knowing if the ship you're in is going to sink and you're chained up and can't go anywhere. And then she's put on another ship during this battle because they're all captured. And then that ship is caught in a storm before arriving in a strange world, and then she's finally forced into serving the prominent Pierce family without even her real name to remember her by. I mean, I give her props for surviving all that, because I'm not sure I would have. Now, on a more positive note, some Africans of Jamestown were freed after years of service, even becoming planters themselves. Now, what is known is that none of them in the 1620 and 1625 censuses were recorded as being slaves, so that's good. Now, despite all the hardships that the colonists faced, there was still the desire as well as the order to look for gold. Unfortunately for them, most of the wealth found in the New World came from raising tobacco, not from finding sparkly metal underground. So around 1619, thanks to the efforts of John Rolfe, yes, the dude who married Pocahontas, tobacco soon became a profitable export for the colony. In fact, it was like exported almost worldwide. Incidentally, in the fort, you'll find the stone outlines of the church where Pocahontas married John Rolfe, and there's even like the spot where the pulpit was. So you literally, if you stand in front of it, you're like literally standing on the spot where Pocahontas got married. I mean, that was really surreal for me. I don't know. But it's just really sad that she had to die so young and so far from home. I mean, she's not even buried in America. But I'll probably do a video on her sometime. Anyway, as the population of Jamestown grew and grew due to the 90 women that had arrived there to find husbands, it was clear that there was not enough space for them all inside the fort. So, to the east of it, along the James River, a place known as Newtown or James City was established, where families moved and built homes and farms. The population swelled to almost 1,300 people, and it wasn't until 1622 that one of the worst events since the starving time would occur. This was known as the Jamestown Massacre. Now, as I mentioned, the relationship between the colonists, the English guys, and the native Powhatan tribe had been like a, an on-again, off-again relationship sort of thing. Sometimes things were peaceful, sometimes they weren't. In short, a number of conflicts broke out between them when the English got too greedy, and among the English's many crimes was their attempt to steal food from the tribe, which is what caused the attack on the fort that led to the winter siege and the starving time. I mean, who could blame the Powhatan tribe for that? You're suffering this huge drought, and then there's these pesky English people who are trying to steal your food. I mean, yeah, I'd be pretty pissed. So their food stores were limited. But the colonists' biggest crime was when they captured Pocahontas in 1613, who was about 17 at the time. I mean, yeah, big crime. You just captured the chief's daughter, okay? And then they held her for ransom, which her father paid the ransom, but then the English played dirty and they kept her. So then, during the time of her capture, not only did she get better at English, but she converted to Christianity. She renamed herself Rebecca, and she made the decision to marry John Rolfe in 1614. Though the marriage was approved of by both sides, it led to a very short-lived and uneasy peace between the two peoples, eventually becoming like a 10-year war that was known as the Second Anglo-Powhatan War in 1622. I'm not going to talk about the first one, because we're already too deep in here. But the massacre was something else entirely. On March 22nd, 1622, the Powhatan tribe attacked the town, killing close to 350 colonists. That's a pretty big number. Most sources listed about 347. In the months that followed, hundreds more would die of a combination of malnutrition, disease, and further attacks. Now, the massacre, as described by scholar Charles Mann, occurred as follows, and I quote, "Early that morning, Indians slipped into the European settlements, knocking on doors and asking to be let in. Most were familiar visitors. They came unarmed. Many accepted a meal or a drink. Then they seized whatever implement came to hand, kitchen knife, heavy stew pot, the colonists' own guns, and they killed everyone in the house. The assault was brutal, widespread, and well-planned. So swift were the blows that many colonists died without knowing they were under the attack. Entire families fell. Houses burned. At the last minute, several Indians told English friends about the attack, providing enough warning to let Jamestown gather its defenses. Nonetheless, the attackers killed at least 325 people." Unquote. Though the exact number of deaths is unknown, it is speculated that John Rolfe, Pocahontas' husband, who had by now remarried, was among those killed during this attack. Now, another attack in 1644 killed over 500 colonists, or about 8 to 10% of the current population, which was about 6,000 at the time, and that ended up setting off yet another war between the two communities, the Third Anglo-Powhatan War. The attack occurred on March 16, 1644, and it was mainly due to the fact that the settlers kept taking more and more land to plant their tobacco, along with importing more enslaved laborers to work those fields, and they needed to live somewhere. Understandably, the Powhatans were pretty pissed off about this. I would be too. I mean, this land was, like, sacred to them in some ways. Like, they performed rituals, they buried their dead there. I mean, yeah, you'd be mad too. So it was theft of this land that led their 90-year-old chief to lead an attack in an attempt to scare the English into leaving America permanently. You really gotta hand it to a 90-year-old warrior going into battle. But he did. Unfortunately, he was also captured the following year and shot by the man who guarded him, ending both his life and the war simultaneously. In the following years between 1646 and 1699, more conflicts occurred with the Native Americans, along with another fire that caused a lot of damage. By 1699, the capital was removed from Jamestown and moved to what is now today present-day Williamsburg, and Jamestown was no longer considered a town, though some residents still did remain. One factor in the reduction of the population was because the water quality was so bad. Not only was salt water mixing into the fresh at the bottom of each well, but the town was dumping its human and animal waste into the river and then drinking it. Ugh. Nothing like taking a piss in the King's River. In addition, high levels of arsenic have also been found in the groundwater, giving rise to theories that the wells were poisoned by the Spanish in an attempt to sabotage the colony. It also didn't help that there's tons of mosquitoes in the area, so unless you feel like scratching yourself 24/7, it's probably not the best place to live. Stay with me here, we're getting close to the end of the narration part. During the 1750s, the land was bought and consolidated between two families, the Travises and the Amblers. Now in my video, I'll actually walk right up to the remains of the Ambler mansion, so you'll get to see where they lived. Over the next several decades, Jamestown Island changed ownership several times, finally becoming part of the Colonial National Historical Park in 1934. Then in 1994, the Jamestown Rediscovery Project began its work in literally digging into the history of the island. However, interest in learning about the site dates back to the 1890s. When the Association for the Preservation of Virginia Antiquities was formed by some local ladies to preserve the ruins of the old red brick church. Excavations during the 1940s and 50s turned up thousands of artifacts, and they are still being found today. Things like pottery fragments, jewelry, pieces of armor, cups, all kinds of cool stuff, and a crap ton of animal bone fragments have been found. I even have a pair of green glass heart-shaped earrings that were a replica of a pair that were found. In fact, that's really cool about the museum and stuff. Like, they sell, like, replicas of actual artifacts, which is just pretty darn cool. Many artifacts are on display in the Archaearium, which is an on-site museum near the fort where you can see the things the colonists left behind with your own eyes. A lot better than looking at it in a book. Now, artifacts aren't the only things the archaeology team found. Remember those metal crosses I mentioned earlier that are scattered within the walls of the fort? Well, every place where a metal cross stands represents the precise spot where a body was found, and there are about 30, just haphazardly buried inside the fort grounds in no particular order. However, it is believed that there are hundreds of unmarked burials in the area. Many bodies were buried in a hurry, especially after the massacres. One of the youngest people to be buried at the fort was killed barely 2 weeks after the colony was first begun. Okay, so imagine surviving a long, dangerous ocean crossing, and for a teenager it's probably boring, only to die 13 days after landing on shore. This young man was a teenage boy believed to be Richard Mutton, who was shot with an arrow in his leg and is thought to have died from the infection at the age of 14 or 15. His death was referenced by John Smith as follows in regard to the attack on May 26, 1607, and I quote, "Indians the day before assaulted the fort. Most of the council was hurt, a boy slain, and 13 or 14 more hurt. With all speed we palisaded our fort." Unquote. The arrowhead that allegedly killed the boy slain was found pointing directly toward his left thigh bone. So basically, when he was buried, the arrowhead was still embedded in his leg. And he also had a fractured collarbone before his death, which was also considered to be a factor in his death. And there was also a healed blow to his head. His skeleton was discovered in 2005, and it lies on display in the Archaearium. When it was found, it was so fragile it would have almost disintegrated if not for the expert care taken by the archaeology team. No one was allowed to take photos of it in the archaearium, so that's why none are here, but you can Google it. Just Google Richard Mutton, Jamestown. You don't want to see it anyway. It's in rough shape, and if that's not sad enough, I later learned that this poor kid had also suffered an excruciating abscess in his mouth caused by broken teeth, so he had pulp exposed, so this poor kid just suffered like crazy. And if the attack on his leg and collarbone hadn't killed him, the jaw infection probably would have. I mean, it's just sad. I mean, his bones are laid out in this glass case, you know, kind of like Snow White in her glass coffin. And I stood there and I looked and it was just, I felt so sad. I mean, someone so young had to suffer all this horrific pain and then dying before ever getting to grow up. Along with the bones of young Richard Mutton are also those believed to be of Captain Bartholomew Gosnold, who was captain of the Godspeed. But the most chilling remains, and this is the ones that really, okay. The most chilling remains consist of the smashed skull and leg bone of a young girl who died without a name. A girl whose body had been cannibalized. Yes, you heard me right. Like poor Richard Mutton, this poor girl was also only about 14 years old, though she was in Jamestown about 3 years after he died. Now, the Jamestown Rediscovery people have named her Jane to give her some form of identity. If you Google Jane of Jamestown, you'll see what she looked like, because they did like a facial reconstruction stuff. Now, what her real name is will probably never be known. Now, what is known is that she arrived in Jamestown in the summer of 1609, but by that winter she was dead, another victim of the starving time. She was found in 2012 in a cellar in the fort, and if I remember correctly, it was the finding of her skull that marked the first evidence of cannibalism here. Like, the first evidence, okay? Other than the written testimony of the colonists. And the reason she was probably found in the cellar is because in colonial times, cellars were often turned into trash pits when the houses were no longer usable, and so were wells that had dried up. I can't tell you how many things they found in the wells. Anyways, the cellar where Jane was found contained over 47,000 artifacts, which was a good indicator that it had been used for colonial garbage. Upon examining the shattered skull, chop marks, saw marks, and various other cutting damages were found, indicating that somebody had removed as much flesh as they could from the poor girl's face, as well as her leg bone, and they had also attempted to get to her brain. Whether or not they succeeded, I don't want to know. And it was also evident that someone with very little knowledge of butchering was the one to do this. Whether she was murdered or died of starvation is unknown, but we do know that many dead bodies were dug up and eaten out of sheer desperation, so it's likely that she died of hunger. However, it is possible that murder for dinner may have occurred on at least one occasion. The colony leader at the time, George Percy, he wrote that one of the male colonists allegedly murdered his pregnant wife while she slept, cut the baby out of her womb, threw it in the river, and then finally chopped up his wife's body and salted it down to save for later to eat. Okay, imagine being that hungry. I mean, I've done and said some pretty nutty things when the walls of my stomach are grinding out a symphony of sounds, but I can't say I've ever done anything that crazy. On that note, we'll end here and go explore the ruins of Jamestown together. Yay! Hopefully by this point you've gained some insight about the people who once lived and died here. I know I have. Though I've told you a lot, there's much more for you to discover. I encourage you to visit www.historicjamestown, Jamestown with an E, .org for an interactive map of the fort, as well as other goodies to explore or just take a trip there yourself. With that, let's go and visit some of the sites where all these stories took place. Well, 36 miles away from Williamsburg, and there's a nice big rainbow in the sky. Don't know if you can see it, but it keeps coming and going. And here we have arrived in historic Jamestown, Virginia. Woohoo! Great to see you again, Hidden History fans. So we are here. We're actually here. I cannot believe it. Let me take a walk over here. See what this says.
And then I'll focus. Let it focus.
Wow. Up at the top It says, Virginia Company of London, chartered April 10th, 1606, founded Jamestown and sustained Virginia, 1607 to 1624.
Pictures are dark.
Wow.
What? They're
This
all dark.
thing is massive. There's a big church over there. Wow. Oh crap. I found Samara's well. Don't get me! I swear I'll find the ring.
Oh, it's an ocean dock. Yeah, like right now I was there last long time. Oh yeah, you can probably see that right there. So I can get like a 55. Technically, if I really want to, I could come out here again tomorrow.
Say hi to YouTube.
Hello, YouTube. Hello, YouTube. Bye, YouTube. Bye, YouTube.
You guys suck.
Bye.
Okay, according to this is the ruins of the Ambler Mansion, according to my map. But I don't know these, because I know that's no mansion. This might have been a stable over here. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to do some more research into that. But, wow, this is really, really cool. Can you imagine looking out your window in the morning and seeing the view of that stunning river? Oh, wow. This is just amazing. It's so peaceful here, too. I bet there's some cemeteries in here that we don't even know about. Oh, wow. That might have been a place where the staircase might have been. If there was a staircase or fireplace, perhaps. I don't know. As usual, the guys don't want to wait for me. Getting some good weather too. It's really nice out here. Unlike yesterday at the cemetery, Arlington. Can't think. Caffeine hasn't kicked in yet. But Arlington was very rainy that day. Wow. I bet this was like somebody's bedroom at one time and another room. People really did live in tiny houses back then. The tiny house movement has been around probably since the beginning of time. Wow. I couldn't imagine living in a house this little though. I got too much crap. This is so cool. And not only is it cool, but it makes me very, very sad. These people are gone. Oh look, I found the other well. It's Samara's other well. She's gonna come and get you. Okay, hidden history. What I showed you before was not the Ambler or Amblin ruins, the mansion ruins. This is the ruins over here. This was like the meeting house ruins, which I'm sure when it was brand new, it must have been spectacular. I mean, look at that. This is all hand done. This must have been a chimney or something. The people who made these structures are long gone. But this place over here, this has got to be the mansion. this tree here was probably here in colonial times. I mean, it's so big. Me, my husband, and son, there's no way we'd be able to span our arms around it. It's that huge. Oh my god. Can you imagine living in a house like that? I mean, it's freaking huge. And that's actually small compared to some of the ones I've seen in Europe. Well, I haven't seen them, but, you know, the ones from, like, Pride and Prejudice, Pemberley. Now this house, this was definitely the Pemberley of its day, at least in Jamestown. It's only a ruin. But I promise I will do some more research on it and give you some more information about it, because there really isn't any over here. And I think I see a sign over there that says restricted area. So, since I'm getting pretty close with my camera, there's really no need to go closer. Time to move on. Here we are, Ambler House. And this thing is enormous. Cannot believe it. I guess they had to reinforce it. Steel beams. You can see where the beams are holding it up, and what's cool is you can see where each room had fireplaces to keep warm in the winter. Wow. Oh, it even has cellar too. That's where they kept all the wine. Yum, 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 yum. Here's my little photographer. Yep, we're definitely not authorized personnel. This is like, I'm just floored. I mean, I'm standing inside of a house that's over 400 years old. There's not much left except these really cool stairs and the Sleepy Hollow tree. Actually, that's what it kind of reminds me of. This tree was probably around before, I mean, it was probably around during colonial times. I'm sure of it. It's enormous. That's the hubby trying to sneak another photo of me. Jerk. Okay, this is the James River. The Jamestown settlement is behind me. And there's a spectacular view of the river from here, which I'm hoping to put on canvases that'll be available in my shop. I cannot believe how quiet it is here. It is just so amazingly, wonderfully quiet. There's no car sounds, there's nothing. I love it. Can I like move here? Couldn't you imagine waking up to this every morning? Even the water's quiet. Okay, hidden history. We are now at the Jamestown settlement, and there's a really big cannon here, which is really cool. And this is the fort, the famous fort. Amazing. Okay, gonna walk through the Jamestown fort. I can't believe I'm really here. This is incredible. Oh wow, Queen Elizabeth was here. I had no idea. Can't believe this. This is so cool. Probably They used to put beds over here or something. Wow. Bet that's a statue of John Smith. Right there. I have no idea. There's like a house ruins over there. I'm not sure what it is. Oh, and there's the archaeological tent right there.
They did,
Yep, Captain John Smith. Wow. Jamestown settlement. So cool. Alright, you ready? Partnership be working. This is so cool.
My guess is that picking his crew, so it's possible some of the crew like kind of came with the ship, but
So cool.
take that one, bud.
Wow.
Oh, that was fun.
Incredible. Oh my god.
hello.
the saturation down.
Wow. I can't believe how much space is down here.
Yeah. Not baking in the sun. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Can you believe how roomy it is down here?
No, we're not going to go up there yet.
Wow. Okay, YouTube, we are on board the replica of the Susan Constant in Jamestown Settlement, Virginia. And we also have the other two ships, the Godspeed, and actually don't know what the other one is, but the ship's been incredible so far. But thank you for being with me today.